The Society, written by Leon Russell. Chapter 5. Inside the Lair. Rolling into the medical storage facility was about like coming into any large warehouse. Stacks of nondescript brown cardboard boxes and racks filled with bottles and cylinders. I was able to leave the cart without notice. There seemed to be only robot handlers in this room, carrying and stacking what appeared to be endless stacks of boxes. The cylinders were carefully placed in their specially made racks with utmost care, and I didn't see a trace of robotic malfunction. It was only after careful examination of the labels on the boxes that I began to get an inkling of an idea about what was going on. The first cylinder I read said, "Immune virus number 1753. Right below that was another that read, "Immune virus 1753 mutation." The next rack was labeled sickle cell blood sample number 158, with the adjoining cylinders labeled with consecutive numbers. My first reaction was that this TV preacher was gathering huge sums of money and spending it all on AIDS research and trying to find a cure for sickle cell anemia. It didn't make sense that he would go to such great expense and trouble to keep this kind of research literally underground and secret. This was exactly the kind of press that would have ultimately raised even larger amounts of money from the TV audience. And besides, it's the kind of information that humanitarianism is made of, and seemed to be the perfect sort of press release for a man like this preacher. My mind was clouded, and I decided it was time to get out of there and try to figure out what was going on. As I made my way to the exit, I managed to pick up a coded identity card from a desk nearby, thinking it would be a good idea to try to come in the front door next time. I had little difficulty finding my way to the elevators and out onto the street. Oddly, the elevator came up to street level inside a large closet that was filled with white lab coats and other paraphernalia related to laboratory work. The room turned out to be in a large skyscraper office building, about 2 blocks from the service station that served as my entrance. That turned out to be the Reverend's private automobile entrance. The walk-in entrances were all disguised in downtown office buildings like the one I came out of. I needed more information on this preacher and didn't have the time to do it all myself. A trip to the microfilmed newspaper section of the public library shed new light on my research. About 1 year before, there was a series of articles on this preacher and his church, written by a staff reporter on the Dallas Times named Cynthia Waters. The articles were not particularly complimentary and suggested a past that was somewhat less than pious, and the possibility that something funny was happening with the money. There were 3 articles, each more devastating to the preacher than the last, and then all of a sudden the features stopped without notice. They sort of built to a non-existent climax. It was with a certain amount of difficulty that I finally located this writer at the University of San Diego. When I called on the phone, she was quite friendly until I mentioned Dr. Remy, at which point she hung up without further comment. Arriving on American Airlines flight number 425 to San Diego, I immediately took a taxi to the campus. The phone book revealed that the address of Miss Waters was very near, so I decided to take a walk and look around. My first stop was at the administration building, where a directory told me that Ms. Waters was teaching a journalism course in the Broadmoor building at this very moment. I thought I would sit in on the class. The lecture was coming to a close as I arrived, but I managed to hear enough to realize that this was a no-nonsense news reporter who felt it was her job to investigate and report the truth, no matter what it happened to be or who it might hurt. After the class, as she was gathering her notes, I went up, introduced myself, and told her how much I enjoyed the lecture. She was very polite, thanked me, and asked if I was a journalism student. I lied and said I was. When I asked if she would like to go for a cup of coffee, there was only the slightest hesitation before she accepted. At the coffee shop, after only a few minutes of small talk, she looked at me very intently and said, "Who are you really?" I was taken completely by surprise, and as I choked on the coffee and sputtered nervously, she said, "This is a small college. I know every journalism student that is enrolled here, and you're not one of them. What's more, you only came to the lecture 5 minutes before the end. I saw you come in the door." Her mild amusement turned to fear when I said I was investigating Reverend Jean Remy. She started to get up and leave immediately, but I finally managed to talk her into staying as I tried to wipe the coffee from the only clothes I had brought on this trip. After a few minutes, when she decided I was not a threat, she told her story. She had stumbled on the story of the Reverend while working on a separate and unrelated article. She was researching a story about hospitals in the Dallas area when she came across an AIDS patient who had been beaten and left to die in the street. The police considered the incident just another of many homosexual bashings that seemed to happen every night, not worth much further consideration. The man had suffered serious physical damage and was being kept in intensive care under close observation. The fact that he constantly spoke of Jesus and angels of death just confirmed their suspicions that his mind had also been affected. But Cynthia said that as she spoke to the man, it became evident that he was terrified of losing his life at the hands of the Church of Reverend Jean Remy. He was finally able to realize that she was a friend who was trying to help him, and with that told a bizarre tale of kidnapping and abuse that covered many months of his life. He was kidnapped from a gay bar by 3 men who kept him tied in a darkened room for many days without facilities or food, finally releasing him into a laboratory where he was constantly kept tranquilized by heavy doses of drugs. He had no idea where he was, but had the impression that he was actually inside the church. The man in the hospital died before Cynthia could find out very much, but the die was cast, and her reporter's curiosity turned up some interesting facts about the Reverend. That was the basis for the article in the Dallas Times. As she was getting ready to write the climax for the series, she was terminated from the paper, and the articles never appeared. It was many months later that she found the paper had been purchased by the church the week she was fired. The fact that Reverend Remy now owned the Times was a well-kept secret.